time for a little manifesto. Times are a little bit crazy. They are loud and full of sometimes stupid opinions. Some people cannot handle fear and like to panic. Some others know that and spread panic and want to gain power and control with these old and cheap methods. And I have to say, looking at all this, these crazy times made me really love martinis again. First of all, there is a need for martinis, a desire, an urban lifestyle which nowadays sometimes get lost. Meeting people in crowded bars, going out for drinks, sitting in five-star hotels and small neighborhood bars, watching people and drinks passing by. Listening to an old piano player, he might have traveled the world or stayed his whole life in London, New York or Hong Kong or wherever. He spices your martini with some jazz and soul. You will never know, we will never know, cause bar piano players do not team up with guests. And they don't tell you the truth. They will lie with a smile in your face. Like a good bartender should do it. Because it's not about them and teaming up with guests, it's about the show. Drinking urban, drinking big, drinking in, or even more important, with style, and drinking classy. That's something I nowadays sometimes really miss, and a martini, a good martini, reminds me not forget this, going out with style and class. Also, a martini for me was always my, or let's say the, liquid symbol of a free and independent world. For brave people who solve their problems on their own. For people who can take care of themselves. Free minds, free speech, always good and open up for a good debate. But maybe the best reason, I think, why I've started to drink martinis all day, kind of, because it's crystal clear and it sharpens my thinking. In a good martini, it's about a very few ingredients, I think, and it's about letting things out and being it very precise and not too much ingredients. So I think there's a perfection in a reduction. Less is more, as some people used to say. So do not get me wrong, I will still put some basil in my gin, or maybe a paper plane is landing in my brain from time to time. A minty tribute to the great Cuban cantineros, for sure, from time to time it's time for that. Let's say an almond-soaked Mai Tai is a nice form of escapism. A 20th century cocktail, a Royal Slow Gin Fizz, a Dubonnet highball. Drinks have times and places and seasons. But sometimes, especially in these times, I think it's more need and time for a martini, at least for iconic ones. So, I have studied, let's say, for the last few months, very much types of martinis. And I would love to invite you to start your own martini experience and your own martini game. And I would love to give you a little bit advice from my, let's say, studies from the last 3 months. I love the fact that a martini should be reduced to the maximum. I think it makes the game much more interesting. If you ask me to enjoy the full game of studying martinis, you need to find your Martini Gin. And try to drink your martinis from now on, if possible, only with your Martini Gin. First of all, I think that's a great attitude. And also, it's focus. It's laser focus, and it opens up your eyes and your senses, and you will spot some real details you maybe have never spotted before. Don't get me wrong, I do not want to convince you to drink my Martini Gin. I found mine, and I will tell you in a second. But to enjoy the game so much I did in the last few months, I would recommend you to find your personal martini. My Martini Manifesto here now. You have to find your gin. That's your manifesto. And start the real and the interesting Martini game. Not the cheap hunt sometimes for more and more flavors and blah blah blah. And there's some very cool people in the bar industry said, no name dropping, no star fucking. There's some amazing people, you know who I talk about. And they know how to drink. Cheers to them. I want to convince you that it's interesting to find your Martini gin. Because reducing the martini to your favorite gin makes the experience, for me, even more elegant. Now there's not so much distraction coming into your mind while drinking martini. As more martini you will drink with your Martini gin, as more I think you will understand that reducing variations to a minimum brings the ability to listen to, let's say, intermediate tunes. And I hope I spelled that or I pronounced that right. You can taste now the style of the bartender. Now you can taste the atmosphere of the location, the sound of the music. And also, you can taste all the little mistakes. Did the ice have a smell? Or does the flavor and the dilution of the ice opens up your Martini gin in a sometimes magic way? Is the zest of the lemon maybe more from an old fruit, lying too long in the fridge and nobody cared about this detail which ends up in a stale and flat citrus taste? Or did your bartender hand-pick a fresh fruit on the market and the fine oils give some delicious smell and these lemons will raise your martini to a refreshing, powerful juniper drop in your mouth? As you reduce variations, as more you will realize details and enjoy them. I practiced this now for a few months and it's working very well. The one thing I want to tell you is find your Martini gin. My Martini gin is Apple. And if you're interested, I would love to explain you why Apple has become my Martini gin. I don't want to convince you. Remember, Martinis are about free and independent people who can make their own decisions. And so I just want to inspire you. Maybe that's also interesting for you, how you can choose your Martini gin. That's important, believe me. Start the Martini game, reduce variations, find your one gin, and then dive into the game for crystal clear minds and for a desire. So let's say the kind of first bullet point, or I don't know if it's a bullet point, but it's a point, and maybe it's a little bit unusual and it's maybe sometimes hard to get that on a list. So I would call that like a friendship or a trust, or I think we can say something like a personal touch if we want to make it more a little bit common. I think you should watch for something personal for whatever bottle will be your Martini gin. Around 2 years, maybe 3 years ago, a very old friend of mine, long-time London bartending veteran and now kind of consulting and jackass traveling all over the world, Mr. Nick Strange, right? Now living in Copenhagen, he managed to give me a bottle of his gin, Apple. And at this time I kind of never heard about it, and at least I have never tried it. So I opened it in my office and juniper was kicking in my nose, like bam! I mixed myself martini and wow, I loved it. So after all these years of sometimes strange flavors of gin, all of a sudden somebody was dancing on my taste buds a classic juniper waltz with a twist. And I liked that. So without any details knowing about the product or whoever, I think this is the part of friendship or trust. I just called Nick because I knew whatever Nick Strange would do, it's no bullshit in the bottle, it's a good product. So I called him and I said, Nick, it's good. I want to bring it to my bar. I want to serve it at Le Lion. Where can I get it? And he said, like, listen, Jörg, we don't have an importer. So I said, okay, can I import it? And he said, yes. And all of a sudden, I ended up importing Apple gin to Germany, which then also was a different experience, but I liked it. So What I don't want to tell you is that you should start to import a gin to make it your Martini gin. But I want to tell you something. You should always, in my opinion, if you go for your Martini gin, you should find a personal relationship having with this bottle. Maybe your grandmother teach you how to drink this gin when you were like 12 years old, I don't know. Or maybe you have a great relation to this product or to this bottle because you emptied it for one night or 1 week or whatever with your best friend, and just there must be something personal. I think if something is something special like the Martini gin, there should be a personal touch to it. Okay, but friendship brings us to people, and I think this is a little bit more everybody can check. You don't have to import the gin, but I always like the idea to the people who are behind the bottle. So who is behind your Martini gin? I mean, if you love to have this 100-year-old history and some class, and you go to an old gin, which is when you go to the old big ones, it's now with big companies, which is fine, sometimes multi-billion-dollar companies, just go for it. It's okay. Why not? I love to know people, and I love people business. I love to know the owners. I love strange owners, and I love them very much more instead some shareholding companies, but that's just personal preferences. I know I love who's behind and what's driving them, and I think for Apple it's kind of complicated, and it's too long to tell you. I don't want to borrow you, but it's 5 strange people. I call them the Apple 5. So it's Nick, it's Walter, it's Valentine, it's Cabri, it's Chris, and I just like the idea to know the people and to know that's cool people and to understand what they do. This is something how I pick the bottle, for sure. Most important, when we reduce your Martini gin to the maximum in flavors, to say we just have one gin for all the Martinis so we can try them better. For sure, the most important thing, I mean, the first 2 ones were more like emotional bullshit from Mr. Meyer. Kind of. But for sure, I mean, a gin is about taste and quality. And there's 2 things I love about Apple, which I found nowhere else on any other bottle of gin. To be honest, it's one thing very special and some more companies do. So, one thing, and this is what a few more gin producers do, but many do not like to talk about if they forgot to do it, is the one-shot distillation. One-shot distillation is much more expensive, it needs an experienced distiller, and you need a great copper-made still. So, one-shot distillation means that you do not distill a concentrate of flavors and botanicals, and which you then extend with nitrogen, alcohol and water. It means that all of your gin, on one side you have the alcohol with the botanicals, and then all the alcohol in this bottle has gone through the whole copper process of the still. And many people, also I believe that this gives very smooth gin and very subtle gin. And if you ask me, that's perfect for Martini. And to be honest, there's a few companies doing it. That's great. And if I would choose a Martini gin, I would maybe have a look if there's a one-shot. Maybe that's something, I don't know, irrational. But I love the idea and I love this like quality thing. And then the second thing I think only Apple does is the strong but also elegant flavor of natural juniper. Doing it very unusual on one side, very modern with a twist. So they have this, they do a classic one-shot dry, London dry gin with some juniper coming from, I have to ask, Italy or I don't know. So classic dry juniper, put it in a still with all the botanicals, make a classic great London dry gin. And then they just go on the fields of Apple, on Walter's fields, and they harvest the green juniper they plant and they grow on themselves. And with this green juniper, they do, one side they do with the green juniper, but also a few other botanicals, they do rotor-vap distillations. So they have a different taste profile from juniper because it's green and it's rotor-vap. And then also they take this juniper and make some supercritical extraction, which is supercritical extraction, which is a very strong pressure, and it gives some oil of juniper. So they have the three types of how to get juniper. One classic and one more like fresh and modern, which gives different tastes of juniper. And I think this is something very special. And I have to say, for me, Martini is all about juniper. So this is why Apple is my go-to Martini Gin, but it's about you and finding you. Whatever you're up to, I would love to hear. So, and also one last point I would like to mention for your Martini Gin, just to think about it. And that's very interesting to find the right balance. I love to go out in hotel bars and in great small bars and in big cities. For sure, at the moment it's a bit tricky. But I love to drink my martinis outside and somewhere in the world, for sure. If it's not possible, I drink them wherever I can. But I think it's interesting to find a brand which has this approach of being international, but still maybe with people behind and not big companies. Because I for sure like the idea that you walk into a bar in London, in New York, in Accra, in Mumbai. I mean, that's a big brand then. And when it's a really cool bar and you have to look for it maybe in your town, but you know at one point these few bars, they stock the product. So that's also why I decided to go for Apple, because they started to be a little bit more, they are in America, they are in England, so they start to conquer the world. But still it's the, you know, it's like this, psst, you got Apple, and it's like this. For sure you got Apple. So I hope I could inspire you a little bit to start drinking martinis in a new way. Reduce them to the max with your Martini Gin. And then listening to some details you maybe have missed before. So, do me a favor. Do not forget to drink martinis. Maybe at 11 a.m. in the morning, kind of. During lunch, the dry martini lunch. In the afternoon, before dinner, sometimes even with dinner. Let me know your martini experience, and even more important, your favorite versions of martini. So, and most important, whatever some people will tell you, be brave, go out and drink, 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 and drink martinis. Cheers.